welcome back and welcome to another kind of series review video. I have done a few series reviews here on this channel, but I do tend to talk about either groups of books in terms of genre or individual book reviews. So this is going to be looking at the series as a whole and my experience reading these books, and I am going to be talking about the Shopaholic series by Sophie Kinsella, which, as you know, if you follow me on social media, I am a massive fan of. And if you have watched my previous couple of wrap-ups, you will know that I was rereading this series one book a week in the run-up to the release of Christmas Shopaholic, which is beautiful, and I have matched my cup today to the cover of Christmas Shopaholic. So yeah, I'm going to dive in and talk about this series a little bit. Now, this series for me, it's kind of divided into individual books together. So I would say that the first kind of section of this series, the first, if you're thinking about it in like Marvel Cinematic Universe, this is phase one. So we have, first of all, Confessions of a Shopaholic, or as it's called in the UK, The Secret Dream World of a Shopaholic. Shopaholic Takes Manhattan, or Shopaholic Abroad, and Shopaholic Ties the Knot, which I think is the same title in the UK. And I feel like these books kind of, they basically run from one to the next to the next. We don't have very much of a gap in between, so we get to kind of follow Becky Bloomwood from one to the next to the next. And these books I read as they were released. I had to wait for them to come out, but I bought these gorgeous kind of double cover editions with credit that I had at Second & Charles here in Denver, so that I could have editions of them to reread and love and enjoy. So those ones all match with their double covers. So obviously in Confessions of a Shopaholic, we meet Becky, we find out about her shopping problem, we fall in love with Becky, we try really hard not to judge her, but some of her little lies and some of her out of control spending is quite dramatic and is quite drastic. But I just absolutely fell in love with her. A flawed main character is one that you can take a lot of pleasure in spending time with. And then the fact that we get to follow her as she moves to Manhattan, and then obviously as she ties the knot. Obviously, I'm not going to give specific spoilers as I'm talking about these books, but we're now on the 9th book in the series, so you're going to have seen spoilers anyway. And if you've seen the movie based on Confessions of a Shopaholic, which I do have a book versus movie video on, I will leave it linked up here, of course, you're going to have seen stuff about these books anyway. So I'm not going, you know, it's quite obvious from the title that she gets married. Shopaholic Ties the Knot, she's going to get married. And then the next few books kind of gives away the plot in the title as well. So these books I love so much because Becky is young and carefree and is discovering the world as an adult, out of living with her parents, having to survive on her own terms with her own job, and what happens when, you know, she's not enjoying that job so much. She is incredibly funny but incredibly kind and caring, for all that she is a bit out of control with her spending and does tell those little white lies to get out of those situations that she's found herself in. She really does care about others, but she is hilariously funny. The humour in this one, I would say, is definitely a lot of British humour. I have met people who are not, you know, have not grown up in the UK and don't necessarily get the humour here. It's definitely a lot of British humour, but having said that, I think it does translate really easily as well. These three books are probably my favourite phase of the series. Confessions of a Shopaholic I just love. I would say that it is quite dated now. Rereading it, I don't know if there have been edits made to subsequent publications of this book. There are obviously many different versions of this book out there. I don't know if it has been updated because this is one of the originals that I am reading here, but yeah, definitely does date. But I think these books still do stand up, even though you know going in that they are going to be dated. I think they do stand the test of time, and they still make me laugh, and I still absolutely love Becky Bloomwood. I, during my reread, did listen to the next phase on audiobook, so I do have some thoughts about the audiobooks that I want to share with you, but in terms of reading, I read these ones as physical books, as the ones you can see here. So I would say that the next phase 2 of the Shopaholic series, are these 3 books. We have Shopaholic and Sister, Shopaholic and Baby, and Mini Shopaholic, which again, the titles kind of give away what is going to happen to Becky, what her next life step is. You know, there's going to be a sister, there's going to be a baby, and then there's going to be a mini. So yeah, so I would say that these 3 are the next phase in the series. These 3 link together really well and feel kind of distinctly separate from the first 3 in the series, because obviously Becky has grown up a little bit now. She's a bit wiser. She's, you know, moving on. She's married. And obviously there's going to be a baby in the picture. Shopaholic and Sister, the first time I read this book, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I wasn't a massive fan of Jess, who is the sister in the title. I really didn't like her as a character, and I didn't like the way she the relationship that she had with Becky and the relationship she had with the rest of Becky's family. And I kind of resented her a little bit. But on the reread, this book was one of my favourites to reread. I found there was a lot to it that I'd forgotten about, and I found myself liking Jess a lot more, having spent the next few books in the series getting to know her a little bit more. So I think Jess on first impression doesn't come off great, but once you know her and you know the way she slots into Becky's life, and you know the way that she kind of is a good complement to Becky's character, you love her even more. So that was really interesting for me, rereading this one and kind of enjoying it more than I thought. I remember really enjoying these ones, but having read this one, I found that I wasn't loving Shopaholic and Baby and Mini Shopaholic as much as I did the first time, because Shopaholic and Sister just came out there and kind of surprised me a little bit. So that was a really interesting thing that happened when I was rereading this series. The other interesting thing was that I did all 3 of these on audiobook, and they were all the American library versions of the audiobook. So I downloaded them either on Hoopla, Overdrive or RB Digital from my library, and they all had different narrators. So from here on in, I basically did them all on audiobook, and I feel like every single one of these had a different narrator, gave Jess a different voice, gave Janice a different voice, gave Becky's mum a different voice, and gave Suze a different name. So Suze is called Suze, S-U-Z-E, and has been called Suze since book 1, but in one of these audiobooks, can't remember specifically which, possibly Shopaholic and Sister, the narrator pronounces it as Susie. And it really bugged me, because obviously I've read all 9 books in the series. Well, at this point, 8 books in the series, because I hadn't read Shopaholic at Christmas. But it really bugged me, and I found it difficult to get on with the book because I was so distracted by the fact that Jess had a different accent in multiple books. They don't pick one accent and stick to it after they change it. You know, she's from Cumbria, she should have a Cumbrian accent, and in Shopaholic and Sister she has a Cumbrian accent, and then she ends up with this kind of East London accent in one of the audiobooks, and then ends up with this kind of like general London accent in another book, and then in the last book that I listened to, she was really quite posh. And then Janice, who is obviously Becky's parents' next door neighbour, so probably will have a very similar accent to them, and does in the first couple of audiobooks that I listened to, then changes, and she ends up with this kind of weird local accent too. So if you are going to do these books on audio, I maybe recommend trying to get the same versions of them, or trying, if possible, to find books with the same narrator, because I feel like they weren't done particularly well, especially if you're rereading them and you're trying to stick with doing the audiobooks. Yeah, it really bugged me, the fact that, yeah, Jess has multiple different accents. She does not have the same accent from one audiobook to the next, so just a warning there. But yeah, Shopaholic and Sister, big surprise in the reread for me. Then the next two books in the series are Shopaholic to the Stars and Shopaholic to the Rescue, and these books are kind of phase 3 for me. So this one is particularly special to me because this is the one where I actually got to meet Sophie Kinsella at the Guildford Literary Festival, and so this is my signed copy of Shopaholic to the Stars, and she was so lovely. I got to hear her talk first of all and then got to meet her, so I treasure this book because she was for a long time an author I really wanted to meet and then wasn't able to meet, and then finally I was able to meet her. I sat in awful traffic from work to driving along the M3, and I was really worried that I was never going to get there. I was sat in such stationary traffic. I literally got there just in time, and so it was wonderful to be at the event, and I got to meet Adele Parks at that event because she basically runs the Guildford Literary Festival, and she was lovely as well. So it was just like such a pleasant evening once I got over the being at work, leaving work, sitting in traffic. So this is a really special book to me, and this and Shopaholic to the Rescue literally follow on directly from each other. So we leave mini Shopaholic and then we turn to Shopaholic to the Stars, and there's not much of a gap between mini Shopaholic and Shopaholic to the Stars. And as you can tell from the cover, Becky is now in Hollywood and is, looking to be a personal shopper to the stars there. And so we get some interesting new characters coming up in this one. I say interesting because they're not necessarily likable characters, and they're not necessarily characters that I feel like were good additions to the Shopaholic clan. I feel like we could have had a little more from Danny in this book. Danny, incidentally, also has multiple different accents in the audiobooks that you listen to. So despite the fact that he is from New York and we meet him in Shopaholic Takes Manhattan, and therefore he has a New York accent, he then develops a kind of estuary English accent and then a northern accent. Like, where is Danny Kovitz, who's from New York, getting this northern accent from? I don't know what was going on there with the audiobooks, but anyway, so yes, Shopaholic to the Stars and Shopaholic to the Rescue, definitely, they're almost like a duology in themselves, and you could probably pick these up if you hadn't read the rest of the series. And I've got the UK cover and the US cover here for you, so obviously these are different books, but it gives you an idea of the difference in the actual different covers. I think this is the first UK cover I've shown you so far. They've all been the US versions. But yeah, these are definitely my least favourite books in the series. And I think it's partly due to the fact that we've got these new characters that I didn't really gel with, and I didn't really like even the second time around reading them. I wasn't a massive fan of them. And then the plot of these two feel like, yeah, it was written all as one plot and then broken down into two books, but I just feel like it's so different from what happens in the 6 books that we've had so far. And some of it I feel is really less about Becky and more about what's going on in the book. And I love the fact that these books so far have been so character driven. The fact that they're called, Shopaholic and Sister, that's 2 characters. Shopaholic and Baby, those 2 characters. And so I didn't like the fact that we stepped away from them being such character driven books. It became almost like this ensemble cast, and the book was about the cast. It wasn't about Becky, and it wasn't necessarily about her shopping. There's also some conflict with Suze in these books, who, when you listen to the audiobook, does go back to being called Suze. But and I really didn't like that. I've become so in love with Becky and Susie's relationship right from the word go. I love them as friends, and I love the fact that, you know, I feel like I'm part of their friendship group from having read and grown up with these novels. And then the fact that there's some conflict with Suze in these books just made me really, really sad, and I don't know if that was the right direction to take them in. I know that these things happen as we get older, our friendship groups change, and obviously we need to reflect that as Becky gets older, but not Suze. Like, you know, let's move away from one of the other friends that Becky has, or, you know, another relationship in her life. So yeah, so I would say that these stand alone as kind of phase 3 in the Shopaholic universe, and they are my least favorite phase. I did find it kind of slightly tough to reread them because I was reading a book a week. I was so immersed in this universe and in Becky's life and in Becky's world, and then when kind of things, lots of kind of not so good things happen in these couple of books, it was like really, really difficult to read in a way. So then we have Christmas Shopaholic, this absolute beauty. I do actually have the UK and the US versions here to show you. So this is the US version, the hardback. Obviously this is the library copy, so it's going to be a bit shiny, but this is it here. And yeah, obviously this is the library copy, but I don't know if the actual version does have any end pages or not. This is Becky as a Christmas Shopaholic, and I think we can agree that the UK cover kind of wins on this one when you see them side by side. So this is a bit of a UK versus US cover video as well. But yeah, we have the beautiful foil. We have red foil and silver foil on the front. I don't know if you can see this is like holographic foil as well. And then the foil here. We have the 2 foils right through onto the spine as well. We have the stunning festive wrapping paper end pages, and of course we have the candy cane sprayed edges on this side and the red on the top and the bottom. So this is definitely a beautiful, beautiful book, and I was really worried, having reread Shopaholics and Stars, Shopaholic to the Rescue, that this one was going to be a kind of continuation of those ones and was going to be in that same phase. But this feels more like we're back to classic Becky Bloomwood. That Becky Bloomwood we've met in Secret Dream World of a Shopaholic, Confessions of a Shopaholic. It's classic Becky. She's wonderful, she's lovely, she's older and wiser now, and you know, her and Luke are classic. We've been married for a little bit longer now. We have a small child, and it's their turn to host Christmas. So you can imagine that, you know, the panic that's going to ensue, the drama that's going to ensue, and the overspending that's going to ensue when Becky Bloomwood is hosting Christmas. I know she is called Becky Brandon née Bloomwood, but to me she's always Becky Bloomwood, and so that's why I call her that. And I do have my matching drink today. I was like, let's just have a matching drink to the book, why not? When you're talking about a 9-book series, you need something to keep you going. So I absolutely love this. I listened to the audiobook, listened to it all at once. Basically, it came in the car with me, it came down to the gym with me, it came back up to the apartment with me, it came to bed with me, and then I finished it. And yeah, it really feels like we're back in classic Becky world. There is a little bit of conflict in this book, a bit like the conflict we had in Shopaholic to the Rescue, but it is handled better in this book. We have all the classic characters there, and they've all appropriately grown and changed over time as they would in real life. You know, the first one was way back when, and we're now in 2019. This is 2019 Becky Bloomwood, and we have to be aware of things like reusable bags and the internet. I love the fact that we have seen Becky's internet shopping grow and change over time as well, and I absolutely love the fact that it has changed over this time. There was one thing in this book that kind of didn't sit that well with me when we're talking about being green and recycling. So Jess is obviously, as we know, somebody who is very economical, and as she's grown, she's become more and more aware of being eco-friendly and having a small carbon footprint. So she is vegan and doesn't like to buy consumer goods. She's not going to buy Christmas presents. She's not going to have a Christmas tree be cut down and brought indoors just for the sake of Christmas. But there is a point where she is talking about there is a child who has been adopted, and the adopted child is wearing a t-shirt that says recycled. And I know that, you know, Jess has obviously bought this t-shirt because it's recycled, and you know, that's the link there to Jess's character. But to me, when I first heard it, I had to kind of like go back and listen to it again. When I first heard it, I was like, are we saying that the child is recycled because the child's been adopted? I'm not sure about that choice there. I think maybe that the whoever edited this there maybe could have picked that up. I don't know. I've not heard anybody else comment on this. It's just been me, so maybe it's just me being a little bit sensitive about that, but that didn't sit that well with me. Aside from that, this is a wonderful Becky Bloomwood novel. It's something that you wouldn't necessarily have to read at Christmas time. Obviously it was mid-October when I read it, so it wasn't yet Christmas or Halloween, but this is something that I could see myself rereading in the summer. And also I think that this one stands up really well if you were just reading this novel. If you hadn't read the other 8 books in the series, I think this one does stand up really well as a standalone novel. So aside from that one point, this was a really, really nice read. That kind of brought it to a sour ending, but then there was a further ending of the book that I was finishing it whilst I was in the gym, and I was sat on the shoulder press crying at the ending of this book. So it did make me cry, it did make me laugh, it did feel like a classic. I feel like we've kind of gone back to phase 1, so maybe, you know, this is chapter 2 of the Shopaholic universe and we're now in chapter 2 phase 1 rather than being in phase 4. But yes, so there you have it, my thoughts on the Shopaholic series as a whole. Let me know in the comments if you like this kind of video where I talk my way through the entirety of a series, or if you prefer standalone reviews, or, you know, reviews of multiple different books in the same genre. I'd be interested to know what you think. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. If you made it this far, give it a thumbs up, and make sure you are subscribed so that my next video lands in your subscription feed. I have lots of good Vlogmas stuff coming up for you this year, so you're not going to want to miss that. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you with my next video. Bye.